The Return of the Twelves by Pauline Clark. Chapter 3. The Perilous Descent. When they reached the fearful precipice of the stairs, they halted, broke out of their column, and stood along the top step like people on the top of a cliff. They waved their arms, peered over, nudged each other, pointed, consulted each with his neighbor, and then gathered round one who was taller than the rest. Max had noticed him before. He was good-looking and well-made and dashing. He might not be so old and wise as Buttercrashy, or so impulsive as the lively one, but he looked more of a leader. Max wondered if he had a name too, and what it was. But he did not want to interrupt their preparations. They formed a line again, and lay down, every man holding on to the ankles of the one ahead. The first was the tall leader, the last was the patriarch, but the leader was the other way round, holding his hands of the next and facing him. Then he wriggled to the edge of the top stair and began to drop carefully down, backwards. The steep attic stair was twice as tall as he was. Before he had touched the ground, the man holding him was leaning well over but held safely by his ankles. The leader gave a small shout, let go the man's hands, and jumped, sprawling onto the first stair. "Well done," Max said to himself, as he saw the brave soldier recover his balance and stand square against the perpendicular wall of the stairs. The next man then turned round, held the hands of the one behind him, and was led over in the same way, but he landed upon the shoulders of the waiting leader, and then slipped down, his back to the ground. Max watched fascinated as each soldier in turn was lowered. But what was going to happen to Buttercrashy? As it was, he was having difficulty in holding the last man without being tugged over. However, the patriarch, 140 though he was, turned round on his tummy, wriggled his legs over, and holding on to the top, lowered himself down. His legs waved. There was a shrill shrieking from the others. The jaunty soldier pranced with excitement, and then the patriarch found the shoulders of the tall leader. He was lifted down by the willing arms of the rest. But this was only one step. They now clustered at the brink of the next. Max could see the difficulty. There was not room for them to lie in a column and hold each other this time. What they needed was a rope or ladder. "We shall be here all night," he said to himself, thinking. He had an instinct that if he were to pick them all up, put them into the shoebox where he kept them, and carry them down, they might think it a terrible insult. They might freeze again at once to pay him out. What he had to do was to suggest some better way and let them discover it. He went into the attic and fetched a ball of string, which was kept in a trunk of brown paper for parcels. He tied one end firmly on the banister post, low down, so that if a soldier stood upon the slope the wooden railings were fitted into, he could hold on to it, and walk down the slope as if he were on a ramp. Then he crept past the chattering soldiers down the stairs with the string, every now and then putting it round a railing to keep it firm. Round the corner he went, and down to the landing, doing 2 turns of the string at the big posts, and so on, until he had made a handrail down the 2 main flights to the hall. Then he pulled it firm, tied a good knot, and cut it off the ball. All they had to do was to clamber up to the slope from the stair. Surely they could help each other up. They seemed sensible and agile. To his utter delight, he met the tall leader on the first landing, waiting at the foot of the slope, as if he were taking the salute at a march past. Above him, at different intervals, came the rest. One ran down shouting a thin war cry. The next slid sideways, both hands on the rope and facing it. The third was sitting down as if he were on a sledge, his hand holding the rope above him. One came down backwards. The lively one used the rope as a trapeze, and swung with his feet drawn up, screaming a thin scream of glee. Max was enchanted. They were all different, like real people. He was only sorry he had missed seeing them notice their rope. He looked up in time to see the venerable Buttercrashy heave the last man up to the ramp, but before the last man descended, he turned round, and, holding the string to steady himself, he held out a hand to the patriarch and pulled him aloft. "Hooray!" Max could not help saying. "You're all different. You're sensible. You think of each other, too." The patriarch marched solemnly down the slope as befitted one so old, slow and upright. This he somewhat spoilt by slipping on the last lap and landing on his back, his heels in the air, but so much did the rest respect him that none laughed except Max, and all gathered quickly to pick him up. The delight of the 12s, as the patriarch had called them, in finding that the rope went on all the way down, was lovely to see. Max tiptoed beside them, very softly, with great pleasure. They made the descent more and more quickly, and with shouts of glee and abandon, the quicker they went, so that they sounded like a miniature flock of whistling, calling, twittering birds in a copse of rain. And now what would they do? All the doors stood open. They could turn into the dining room or the drawing room or the study. They could march along to the kitchen. They could even snuff the call of the open air from the front door, which stood wide, and go out into the sunlight. At this minute, the hot afternoon stillness was shattered by the piercing ring of the telephone. As he hurried to answer it, Max could not help watching the soldiers. They jumped as if they were shot and clustered into a crowd, holding their hands to their ears and looking up into the sky or ceiling. Max reached the telephone, seized it, and stopped its din. "Hello?" he said. He had not yet learned the number yet, and he was too startled to say anything else. He kept his eye on the soldiers. "Maxie? Yes? Are you all right, darling?" "Yes, very." "What are you doing?" "Oh, mucking around." "You were quite near the phone." "Yes, I'm in the hall." The 12s had formed up and were making for the drawing room. "In the hall? Why don't you play in the garden?" This was the kind of stupid question grown-ups always asked. "Because I like being in the hall," Maxie said patiently. "Anyway, I'm going in the drawing room now." They had disappeared into the drawing room. He was missing all the fun, yet it was kind of his mother to ring him up. "Have you had your tea?" "Not yet. I haven't had time," Max said. "When you have it, you can give Brutus his milk." "Where's Brutus?" Max said, a sudden horrible thought striking him. "Last seen by me in the green chair in the drawing room," said his mother. "Help! Well, goodbye, Mummy. I'm in the middle of something. Goodbye, darling. Glad you're all right." Max slammed the receiver back and hurried for the drawing room. The soldiers were marching unsuspectingly over the carpet, letting out little sounds of amazement. Brutus, woken by the telephone, had reared up in his chair and was stretching, his back arched like a croquet hoop. The fur on his fat legs parted in flakes. He turned round, hearing Max, and saw them moving. His ears went pointed, his whiskers were pushed forward, his mouth opened slightly, and he yickered as when he saw a bird near at hand. "Brutus!" gasped Max. Brutus took a flying leap and landed smack on top of the moving soldiers. "Oh, help, help!" Max said, diving forward. "You've squashed them. You'll kill them, you beastly cat!" And he seized Brutus hastily and lifted him up. The soldiers, winded and terrified, fled in all directions, all except one limp form who was clutched in the crook of Brutus's great white paw. Max gently detached him, put Brutus out, and shut the door. The poor fellow was in a complete swoon, and no wonder. Max laid him on the carpet and waited. Soon the noble Butter Crashy came out from under a chair, and the rest cautiously followed. They ran to their companion and began to cheer him up. They lifted his head and rubbed his hands. "Take heart, Bravey. Remember your own saying. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. But you are not dead, I assure you. The genii have protected you. Pray sit up and stop fainting," said the jaunty soldier crossly, jealous of the attention the sufferer was getting. "Give him air. Let Cheeky get at him. Let the stout-hearted doctor see him. Out of the way, monkey." "Stand back, Cracky and Tracky," said one of the men, who must have been the doctor. Max saw the doctor make a few paces over the soldier called Bravey, feel his pulse, and rub his hands. Bravey came to and blinked and sat up. "Quite resuscitated," said Cheeky the doctor. "Made alive," said the patriarch. "Bring him some wine," suggested the tall leader. "It little becomes the Duke to ask for wine in the wilderness," said one. Max crossed to the cupboard where his father kept the drinks. He took out the tiniest glass there was, meant for liqueurs, poured a drop of sherry into it, brought it over to the soldiers, and said softly, "The genie can do anything, even bring wine in the desert." They gathered round the glass with whoops of joy. They dipped Bravey's finger in it and made him suck it. He at once became more cheerful and talkative. "Eat, drink, and be merry," he squealed. Soon they were all dipping their hands in and sucking, and the noise was considerable. And that's the end of chapter 3.